Huffoto Presents podcast. My name is Brian Huff, and today I'm joined with Officer Dameon Blue.
Good evening.
How's it going?
I'm doing fairly well. How are you?
Pretty good. I enjoyed seeing the sun today. That was nice.
After the weather and stuff that we've been having, man, let me tell you.
That's been a nice change.
Absolutely.
So this podcast is probably going to come out around the second week of February, and if I'm guessing right, we should have the second issue of the magazine out. So
okay.
I think we can actually talk about you're on the cover.
Yeah, first time.
Awesome. I mean, that was such a fun shoot to do with you, and we had some other people come in as well, didn't we?
We did. It's the whole theme with Black Panther, and gosh, it was so much fun. The times that we had done it, and your craft is absolutely amazing. The stuff that you can do with lighting and then all of the other stuff. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
It was fun. I really enjoyed it. We'll have to do it again too, because that's the one thing I love about cosplay photography. So we will probably shoot something, and then I'll think of 10,000 things we didn't do, and we're like, hey, we got to do this again.
Right.
So, thinking about that, when did you is cosplay something like as a hobby of yours? Is it something you've done?
It became a hobby when I was approached for the benefit for Carl Perkins Center.
Okay. Superhero Day.
Yeah, Superhero Day. That was absolutely my first time ever doing anything like that. And I remember struggling to find a costume because I wanted something that was going to be more realistic.
Sure.
And not so Halloweenish, if I can say that.
Yeah.
And so it took me a while, and then I finally found one. It's like, that's kind of doable. And and showed up, and man, it was on from there,
Right. Yeah, I think there's definitely a fine line between costume and cosplay. I mean, I think though that's a good way to people to get introduced to it. I think Halloween and dressing up. I know personally, I would say cosplayed as anything until maybe a couple of years ago when a friend of mine actually did my makeup for Joker, and I'd always worn masks. And so when you wear makeup and you can like emote through it, that's that's a different feeling.
It is a different feeling. That's
kind of strange.
Yeah. And I kind of felt that, when I put the uniform on the first time and I looked in the mirror and I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like this is kind of convincing.
It's really cool how you can embody it.
Absolutely. And then you automatically start to have movements that you feel the character actually does. Right. And so it was quite moving. It was a lot of fun. Yeah,
I can't play characters that are very flexible.
I don't do it so well as I used to, but I'm working on it.
I did good, though, with the Joker dragging. I caught myself dragging my leg because I was playing the version of him after he'd been beat up in the interrogation scene. There was a point where he got hit and he was dragging his leg. And I caught myself doing that.
Really?
But I was having so much fun.
It becomes innate. Yeah. You just do it. It just is. And so you start to remember all of the different movements and things that the characters do. And it's so natural once you get in the uniform or the costume to want to emulate that.
Right.
And so it's a lot of fun.
I think too for people that are, say they're shy in real life, this is a chance to sort of put a shield up between you and be someone else and step out into the world and maybe interact with people a little bit more freely. And have conversations and have fun and enjoy being around other people. When normally when you're just yourself, it's maybe not so easy. I know personally the camera kind of gives me a license to go out into the world. People probably wouldn't know this now, but I'm like very shy, and it actually takes a lot for me to walk up to someone and say, "Can I take your photograph?" Like if I'm just walking a convention, it's still, and even still after 17 years, I lose sleep the night before a photo shoot. And but you're
exactly right. It does give an element of freedom being in costume. You can totally be someone else, and moreover, you can totally be the character. So if you are naturally reserved, and ironically enough, I am as well. I really gravitate away from crowds.
Yeah.
So, but when you're in it, you can really. Not only can you be something else, you can be the better of something else. So if your character is Wonder Woman, then you can embody everything that we know Wonder Woman to be.
Right.
And so if you not only past being reserved, but just being better, if you will.
So did you get into comic books as a kid, or were superheroes kind of something that you grew up with? Or?
Yes. Growing up, my three favorite, I've got a bunch of stories. I'll never forget seeing Christopher Reeve as Superman the first time in theaters. And I literally thought that I was Superman.
Wow.
And my mom tells this story. At the time, we were living in Nashville, Tennessee, and had a bunk bed. And she just so happened to have a red towel. And I got home from the movie. I was excited. It was everything that you can imagine for a young child. And I tied that red towel around my neck, and I jumped off of the bunk bed. I flew for about maybe 2 seconds.
But what a 2 seconds.
But what a 2 seconds it was, yes. You know, I get up and I was bleeding, and, you know, the nose and lips and all of that stuff. But it was just so invigorating. So,
right.
From Superman, I was always a big fan of the Incredible Hulk.
Okay.
And probably my favorite, ironically enough, back then was Spider-Man. I had probably every comic book of Spider-Man that I could recall. And I would just read them over and over and over again. So
wow. So that's interesting. Going back to when you talked about being the better of something, would maybe looking up to those heroes or anything like that, do you think maybe affected your decision to go into law enforcement?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
You know, a lot of cops have the protective instinct. You know,
right.
The desire to want to make everything around them better, to protect those who can't protect themselves. And so all of that had a very direct result in me choosing the career that I did. Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
And I would imagine that's got to be, on top of being, of course, a very dangerous job, and thank you for your service in this job, but it's got to be very... I would imagine the rewarding side of being in law enforcement is outweighs the bad. It
does. I mean, much like anything else, the ugliness of the world is what gets the most attention.
Oh,
you know? And can't deny that those things exist, and so not going to say that they don't. But it's a lot of the other work that people don't see, that don't make the news media.
Right.
You know. I can remember times when traffic wasn't as heavy those days, and so I just wanted to serve. And I would go. I can remember carrying groceries out in uniform. You know, it's just those types of things. It's just serving, and reminding people that officers, excuse me, just like everybody else, you know, some people get paid to swing a hammer. Some people get paid to take pictures. I get paid to enforce the law. It's nothing personal. It's just business, you know.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's, to me, thinking about community and thinking about how all this affects. And going back to the Carl Perkins thing, you know, Superhero Day to me, and the police officers, you know, serving there in uniform those days. And I believe we talked about in the last episode with Jason and Melissa how important that is for children to see police officers in normal situations, and especially in a situation like this where they're approachable.
Right.
So that they learn, oh, if I need help or if I'm in trouble, I can walk up to one of these folks and be like, hey.
And that's very necessary because, and a lot of parents do it, and I get it, but how many times have you been out, let's say at McDonald's, and a kid is being a kid, and an officer happens to be somewhere around, and the parent will say, "You better be good. I'm gonna have that officer to get you."
Yeah, I don't like that.
Ask any cop; they'll tell you the exact same thing.
Yeah.
We don't like that.
Yeah,
but we get it. You know, it's
I can see, being a parent, I can see it. On the other hand,
what are you teaching the child?
Yeah, no, exactly.
So,
and especially in a world today where kids, I feel like, especially now more than ever, aren't kids. They grow up way too fast. And,
oh my gosh, yes.
I mean, of course, now at the same time, I'm glad we didn't have YouTube and the internet when I was a kid.
Yeah, it was so much better then.
You know, the kids today can't get away with anything.
No, not at all.
We'd have been in trouble all the time.
Oh my gosh, man. But you're right. It is very good for the kids and the community as well, to see us in those events and just being what we are. You know, moms and dads, uncles, aunts. So those types of things, and having that relatability is very, very important to bridge the gap of every community that I've ever been a part of.
Right. Just thinking about are there any other characters you've thought about? I mean, you've done Black Panther well.
I've done Black Panther. I don't know if there's
curious if there was another one if the bug had bit you enough to be like, you know what? Who else? Maybe I should be Spider-Man.
I would never really wanted. Never thought about Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. Okay. But I have thought about Green Lantern.
Okay.
I did give that some thought. And I've tried of course, it's not necessarily Marvel or anything, but I've tried really hard to convince my son to be Frozone. And I think he could pull it off so well.
I love that movie so much.
Yes.
The Incredibles is so fun.
Because when I was working for the local law enforcement here, one of the guys I used to work with was a really large guy. And I would often comment and I would say, hey, here comes Mr. Incredible, because he's that big.
Right.
And then from there, it's like, oh, so you Frozone. It's like, you know what? We could probably do that. We could pull that off. So
that would be awesome.
But between Green Lantern, I think is the one that I would, if I don't do Black Panther, then I would absolutely try Green Lantern.
Cool.
Because I don't know if I've ever seen a Green Lantern, and that's the reason why.
I was sitting here racking my brain, and I'm like, you know what? I don't know that I've seen one.
And that's the reason that I would do it.
Yeah. I'm just like, I was sitting here really just thinking, I was like, have I even photographed a Green Lantern?
Yeah.
I don't know that I have.
Yeah, so we may have to make that work.
Yeah,
so,
that might have to be a thing. Yeah. But so this month I felt it was very important to represent our cosplayers of color, because it's February, it's Black History Month, and Ebony is in there, and Miss Ebony is always awesome
she is, isn't she?
To hang out with. Yeah, I mean, she's just always positive and always just a fun person to be around at the conventions and stuff like that.
And she very talented, and photographs remarkably well.
Yeah.
If there was ever an individual that's made for cosplay and those things, it's absolutely her.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
She's wonderful.
And it's funny because my thoughts on cosplay and being, I think a lot of people don't realize how vast of a community we actually have around here. I think it's kind of been under the radar for a long time. And as more and more events get closer, of course, Jackson Con is coming back this year.
Really?
It's going to be the first weekend of March.
Okay.
And so I'm excited about that because it's another one closer to home.
Right.
And so I'm always excited when we get events going on closer to home. So that'll be at the Carl Perkins Center up there in Jackson. On I think it's March the 2nd or somewhere right in there. It's the first Saturday. So I'm always excited to see new stuff pop up.
Absolutely.
So
that's one of the things that was so surprising to me. The first one that I went to is we may have touched on this before, but how elaborate the costumes were.
Right.
Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. I mean, they were just absolutely fabulous.
And that's always amazing.
To the extent that of course, we know the difference.
Right.
But to the children that we serve, they were just in amazement, and it's absolutely wonderful.
It's Superman
Absolutely.
to them, or it's Catwoman. It is that person
it is
that's
that
standing in front of
individual.
her. What if the Frozen stuff?
Yeah.
That was really big. It is that person,
Yeah.
and you see it in their eyes. Their face just lights up.
And ironic, with me, I try to keep myself in shape, but every time this time of year comes around, I always remember, it's okay, you got to do a little bit extra because I want to make it as authentic as I possibly can for the children that we serve. So
that's awesome. That's dedication.
Yeah.
I always tell people round is a shape. That's my shape.
Yeah.
Oh man, but I'm looking forward to all the events this year. We've got a lot coming up. I'm trying to think of what else is going on that's close to home. I know Jackson and of course Memphis and Tupelo, and Haywood County now.
Okay.
And in Brownsville. Going back to talking about the cosplay and growing up younger, did you ever think about when you saw the superheroes and stuff like Superman, you related to Superman, you were inspired by him just immediately? Were there any other ones that you ever saw and that just struck you? It seems that Superman struck a chord with you immediately.
It did. Superman, it did. Even now, I have a copy of every Superman movie that's been made over the last 20 years when they started doing those. So I guess just the honor and integrity that he had always portrayed. And if any others, I guess, would be...
His was, I guess, more pure, wasn't it? Because
It
you look
was.
at Batman, it's
kind of dark.
It is kind of dark.
Yeah.
It's more vengeance related, It's more of that vigilante, whereas
Right.
When you look at Superman, it's kind of a different vibe.
Much different vibe, pure in a sense.
Yeah.
His approach to things was very pure in a sense. And of course, I mentioned Spider-Man, but I always loved the internal struggle of the Hulk.
That's interesting.
Always loved the internal struggle of the Hulk.
I can always relate to that about a half hour before I get coffee.
Absolutely, I like that. And I like the Hulk because I think it's relatable to everybody. I mean, of course, we don't have the strength that character possesses, but
we have the anger.
We have the anger.
But I guess the question was, how did he channel that anger? Because he could have been a villain if you think about it. He could have been an amazing villain,
unstoppable villain. And so he understands the power of what he possesses, of what lies within him, and until he was able to control it like he felt it needed to be controlled.
Right.
He lived a life of solitude. Imagine the sacrifice that takes.
You have to cut yourself off from the world to protect it from yourself.
To protect it from yourself, absolutely.
Because you know what you are.
Yes.
Wow.
And I've always liked that struggle that the Hulk presented, because I could relate to it,
I think, they've got the multiverse thing going on in all the different comics and all. I think an arc where he becomes a villain would be very interesting.
Can you imagine the measure of destruction that would...
I think that would be...
His ability to regenerate. And because if you think about it, he gets stronger and larger the more angrier he becomes.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing that you can do to stop that.
I think that would be fascinating. So we'll just put that out there. The Hulk villain arc needs to exist.
It needs to take place.
Just to give us I think it would be interesting, just the thought process of realizing, because I never realized that what had happened with Hulk until you put it in that framework, and that he had this self-awareness to not only realize the power he possessed, but the fact that in the beginning especially he had no way of controlling it.
Right.
And so
the only thing that he could do was to live a life of solitude.
Wow.
So if you go back all the way back to Bill Bixby, the beginning of every story, he's walking along the side of the road.
It's all alone.
Hitchhiking,
right.
And he does the same thing at the end of the story. He understands that he until he can control it, that rage within him, because there's no telling what sets him off.
Wow.
And so I think a lot of us, even now, if we are honest with each other, that we have the capacity to become enraged. And once we become enraged, what are we capable of?
I mean, yeah, and I think that's those split seconds where when you forget actions equal consequences that wreck a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so yeah.
Yeah, so the Hulk, I wasn't necessarily old enough to understand, but I knew that it was something different about him. About just remembering growing up in the 80s and watching the sitcom,
Right.
Seeing how he started the episode alone and he ended the episode alone,
Right.
and how he would struggle to keep himself from becoming angry. To me, that spoke volumes. It said, just because you can go
Right.
off the handle doesn't mean that you should. You should do everything you can to keep that under wraps.
Wow. Well, that is a fascinating look into the Hulk. Well, I tell you what, I'm super excited. We got to shoot the Black Panther thing again
Absolutely.
one day. And that'll be super fun.
Absolutely.
And I will give you a sneak peek. Everybody out there in podcast land's not going to see it yet, but you're about to get to see the first version of it for February's edition.
I've got to remind me. I just left my mom's house. Today happens to actually be my birthday, and so she baked me
happy birthday!
Thank you. And my favorite cake that she makes is the pineapple upside down cake, and so I had to go to her house and pick it up. And right as I was leaving, she says, "You better make sure that when that magazine comes out that I get one." So
we'll have to make
yes,
sure.
Ma'am.
Have to make sure.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, Dameon, thank you so much for joining me here today.
It's my pleasure.
And having this
Really
time,
is my
and we'll
pleasure.
do this again too. And everybody out there in podcast land, thank you so much for listening. My name is Brian Huff, and we will see you on the next one.